All right, guys, we are back. This is the Shillin and Duffy Show. This is the UFC 254 recap. I am your host. My name is Keith Shillin. I'm a writer for Sherdog. I'm also the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, with which this is going out on, also on the Sherdog Radio Network. I am joined by the senior editor of Sherdog.com, the great Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Midday UFC card, great UFC card. It just ended a little while ago, so like my fingertips and toes are still buzzing a little bit. I cannot wait to dig in.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about right now. First thing I want to say is we're doing something much different than we normally do. Right now we are, besides the recording for the podcast that is on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and also Sherdog Radio Network on Sherdog.com, we also decided, and I decided this maybe 5 minutes before I called Ben, to try to stream this live on YouTube. And then we're going to try to stream it in other places going forward. I am not the most technically sound person, so I'm hoping this is working. I believe it is. But what better time to just kind of wing something and try different platforms than one of the biggest UFCs of the year when you're doing a recap show. But we're in the middle of the daytime. My background is much different than I normally am because right now it's 6:23 p.m. in the East Coast. Usually when I'm recording this, it's extremely late at night. My children are in bed. I can do it upstairs. Instead, I'm stuck in the basement where I can see I'm a little dark. But enough about what we're doing. Let's talk about the event itself. UFC 254 just wrapped up probably about, I'd say maybe an hour ago. In the main event, we had Khabib Nurmagomedov, the UFC lightweight champion, taking on the highlight, Justin Gaethje. Ben, heading into this fight, I think we both talked about how, we both picked on the breakdown show, we both picked Khabib Nurmagomedov to win. We both were correct. I know I picked submission. Did you also pick submission?
I did pick submission. I picked submission in the fourth or fifth round. Yeah. Not quite as quick as it happened, but same with
me. I picked a fourth round, and we both had that right. But I don't think any of us expected what happened. This, I almost said tonight is midday or whatever. What happened, because it was as good of a performance from Khabib Nurmagomedov we've seen, and all we kept saying in the build-up to this is probably Khabib Nurmagomedov's toughest test to date stylistically. You had the NCAA wrestler, the All-American, the leg kicks. You had every reason. There's a lot of very smart people that, I don't want to say, hey, you got it wrong, because that's not me, but a lot of very smart people who had taken Justin Gaethje for stylistic reasons, people who do film study, and Khabib Nurmagomedov had an unbelievable performance tonight. Tell me what you thought about his performance.
Complete dominance, and that's not to say that Gaethje didn't have his moments. He landed some of those leg kicks. He landed one of them hard enough to basically spin Khabib around in place. I can't remember whether he went all the way down from it, but he landed a couple of really good leg kicks. He got in a couple of really solid punches in exchanges. He fought off the first takedown, but Khabib ended up doing Khabib things to him, and quicker than either of us expected. And it was just a reminder that the UFC was already trying to push the narrative at us that, this is the top pound for pound fighter in the world. Nurmagomedov himself is obviously he's been very bent on being called like the greatest lightweight champion in history, but that's all a debate for later. What I'll say now is I think he is the greatest ground fighter in MMA history. When you take the complete package of getting the fight to the ground under his terms and being able to apply ground and pound or submissions while never being in trouble himself, he is just the greatest ground fighter we've ever seen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. When you've seen, we said it during the breakdown, I called him the greatest ground fighter of all time. What you've seen, what he did tonight to Justin Gaethje, I mean, we talked about the X's and O's. We really like to get into the X's and O's, especially on the breakdown show. And if you're watching this live on YouTube and have never seen the breakdown show, we record that midweek. Make sure you check that out. Definitely a lot more technical analysis in that. We had all the reasons why one guy could win and what this other guy had to do. But to me, while we both picked Khabib Nurmagomedov to take down Justin Gaethje and eventually get a submission, there was so many things that was happening in this fight that I did not expect. First of all, how successful Khabib Nurmagomedov was doing on the feet with his hands. I mean, if you took out the kicks of Justin Gaethje and you took out the wrestling and we just strictly took just punches, strictly a boxing match, Khabib Nurmagomedov was winning a boxing match against Justin Gaethje. And after what Justin Gaethje did to Tony Ferguson earlier this year, nobody would have said that Khabib Nurmagomedov had any chance on the feet with the hands with Justin Gaethje. But I think what happens, and this is what's the amazing thing, a lot of times what we do is we like to take a fighter and we like to break him down in sections, as if like wrestling's by itself, kickboxing's by itself, boxing, all these things, but they blend together. In one area, you can be so strong that it makes you better in another. And what I mean by that is Justin Gaethje was so worried about the takedowns. You could see him by this movement. He was dropping, he was keeping his hands low, that he was getting picked apart on the feet because he was dropping his hands. So what I'm trying to say is Khabib Nurmagomedov's amazing takedowns, his amazing wrestling, which, you know, Justin Gaethje's been hearing for years, set Justin Gaethje up to actually fail. That if he just, I thought he'd do much better if he just, you know, treated him like any other fighter and let his hands go a little bit. And he couldn't because he was so worried about the takedowns. Did you see that also?
I wouldn't have been able to elucidate it until you pointed it out that way, but that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't find, because we do a live stream, I don't know where the mute button is because I'm using a whole new thing. So I'm trying to mute with my finger on the actual microphone, and I'm already failing at that. So Khabib also did not get credit enough for his pace in this fight. And we talked about this pace on the broadcast, but he is so fearless to like, he was walking, even when he was getting hit, even when Gaethje had moments with his hands, Khabib was just walking through those punches, making Justin Gaethje work. And then eventually, you know, he shot 2 or 3 times, got him down. The narrative, Khabib can't take down top wrestlers, that narrative is put to bed as he easily took down Justin Gaethje. But what was most amazing is not only did he take him down, how quickly he got right to him out. Like, he did it right at the end of the first round, did it in the second round. And then the thing that really surprised me is Khabib, you know, he locked up the legs, he did all that things that we talked about, but I didn't expect him to, like, basically not ground and pound and start looking for submissions. In the first round, he went for an armbar. I understand that even at the end, he got a takedown in the round. I said, well, you could beat him up a little bit, but he tried to end it with an armbar. Okay. But it's the second round with like half the round left, or how much was left, for him to set up a triangle, and then, you know, when you set that triangle up, you're going to get rolled to your back. Like, you're taking a chance that now you're going to be on bottom, which he's not. You know, we've never seen Khabib on bottom. To set that up was absolutely amazing to me. And then to force Justin Gaethje to tap out, absolutely incredible. I've always been the biggest Khabib supporter, or I shouldn't say supporter because I don't root for fighters, but I mean, I'm a believer in him and all his skill set, and I thought he was head and shoulders above everybody. To me, there's no debate that, like you mentioned, the greatest lightweight champion of all time. All right, I don't know where I want to go with this. I think he's the greatest lightweight of all time. I don't, and we're gonna have to talk about this in a second, but you know, he announced afterwards his retirement. I just want to put a pin on that because we'll get to that. His longevity, his years of dominance has been long, but there's been guys who've been able to dominate longer. So when we get to a question I'm going to ask in a minute, I'm not going to put Khabib as the greatest fighter of all time. But if I could say who during their prime was the most dominant fighter of all time, is there anybody else in their prime that could match what Khabib has done?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And there's no argument there. When you bring someone like Khabib into the greatest of all time conversation, it reflects a lot about what you value or what you're really asking. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the same argument when people are talking about heavyweight. Who's the greatest heavyweight of all time?
Sure.
We've had this conversation fairly recently,
mm-hmm.
but for a lot of people, it's still Fedor, just because of the length of that streak.
Absolutely.
Where he beat almost all the other top names in the division at the time, except for the few that were stuck in the UFC. Even if he had some not so tough fights in between, that's what's important to them. And if that's what you value in greatness, then yeah, Fedor still is the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think the greatest heavyweight of all time, if I answer that question, it's going to reveal what I value. Because I say that healthy Cain Velasquez from 2014 could beat any heavyweight that's ever walked the planet. But he was injured so often, his prime was so short because of that, and he fought so few times, and was kind of caught in that circle of fighting just JDS and Bigfoot Silva for 3 years, that his resume doesn't stack up. It's the same with Khabib, because the thing is, Khabib is 29-0, 13-0 in the UFC. He's now one of just 4 men to defend the UFC lightweight title 3 times, along with BJ Penn, Frankie Edgar, and Benson Henderson. But because of the route he took to the top, he's really only been fighting the best of the best of the best for the last couple of years. If you look at Frankie Edgar's resume, he fought nothing but top 5 lightweights for basically, a huge chunk of his career.
Yeah.
That's really only been Khabib in the last couple of years, but he's absolutely the most dominant.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you talk about strictly dominance, I mean, think about this for a second. I just found out that 2 of the judges, out of the 3 judges, actually gave the first round to Justin Gaethje, which I think is absolutely insanity. But we've been talking about how amazing Khabib Nurmagomedov was tonight, how he took out one of the best lightweights in the world, a guy that many people thought would win, and he took him out with a submission in the second round, and this still might have been Justin Gaethje might have put up a better fight than anybody else. Who has actually put up, guys have gone longer, Conor McGregor made it to the 4th round, different, Ally Quinton made it all 5 rounds. But Justin Gaethje had more moments in this fight than maybe any other fighter, and still got absolutely smoked, which is, other than the Gleison Tebow, which, I know I've said, who's done better than Justin Gaethje? Well, Gleison Tebow didn't, but that was 8 years ago or something, or whatever it was. In this recent run, nobody has done a better job than what Justin Gaethje did, and he still got smoked. That's why I'm saying how amazing. I'm sad afterwards. He talked about retiring. I'm sad because I want to see how long he could do this. Could he make it to 30-0? Could he make it to 40-0? Could he, eventually he'd have to retire, but what kind of run would he go on? So that's why I'm so sad. And going back to greatest ground fighter of all time, that's done. Nobody. No, there's better submission guys. Your Charles Oliveira, your Damon Mayo, whoever you want to put in, Fabricio Verdum. But when you encompass takedowns, ground and pound, submissions, everything, it's Khabib and it's Mayo, because he made Justin Gaethje a very good wrestler look extremely weak tonight on the ground. So what'll be overshadow his performance is what was happening afterwards. He was immediately as the fight ended, he dropped to his knees, began to cry, sob, rightfully so, considering his dad recently passed away. His first time performing without his dad there. He talked about his dad's dream. His dad was his coach. It's completely understandable for him that moment. And then he started taking off his gloves, and he said he didn't want to fight without his dad. His dad wanted him to fight Justin Gaethje. He fought that, but he told his mom that was it. He promised his mom it'd be his last fight. I don't know. There's a lot of avenues I want to go down. So let's go this. I believe him. We've talked about this many times that, everyone says they retire, then they come back a little while later. I read an article today about Henry Cejudo. Always, he's supposed to be retired. He's supposed to accomplish every single thing you could possibly imagine, but he is still poking off the right price. I might come back. Khabib's word, I don't know him personally, but he just seems like someone, if he gives his word, then that's it. He cares more about honor than money and accolades. Do you also believe him?
I completely believe him. Reasonable people can differ on whether he's a likable or admirable person overall.
Sure.
But he's not a bullshitter, and never has been. I believe him more than I've ever believed another fighter who announced his retirement. And considering that tonight we saw Stefan Struve, and I saw Stefan Struve announce his retirement after he was diagnosed with a hole in his heart, I believe Khabib more than I believe Stefan Struve back then. I believe he's gone. And he's a guy that's never needed the trappings of this. He doesn't especially need money. He's never needed this. He's never needed external validation. He's not going to be the guy that is, throwing out little barbs on Twitter 2 years from now when top lightweights are fighting. He just won't need to.
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. Khabib, once he beat Conor, the biggest fight in UFC history, he beat Conor. What'd he do? He was out for a while because he basically didn't believe his teammates had been punished, and he kept his word that, until you remove the punishment, I'm not going to fight. That's the kind of person he is. He's an extremely loyal guy. So I totally understand that. I want to get on this because, you know what, we just love doing this. We say the readers of Sherdog love this, but we all love doing this. You rank. We talked about the most dominant fighter in UFC history, but then neither one of us called him the greatest. I've gone on record many times. I believe John Jones, based on his skill set, his longevity, his title defenses, who he's beating, basically being undefeated himself. Also, I say he's the greatest fighter of all time. Then you're going to have your list after him. Where would you put Khabib in the greatest? Now he only has 3 title defenses. That's like the big, that when these other guys have 8, 9. Where would you rank him all time? And I actually want I don't want somewhere in the top 50. I want to know who would you have ahead of him.
I would have Jones ahead of him. I would have George St. Pierre ahead of him. I would have Demetrius Johnson ahead of him. I would have Anderson Silva ahead of him. I would have Fedor Emelianenko ahead of him.
That's it? I mean, that's the list, right?
I'm thinking down into the lower weight classes now.
I know. I mean, I put you on the spot.
But do I put Jose Aldo ahead of him?
It's tough. I mean, I kind of knew I was going to ask this question, so I was a little more prepared, so I probably should have went first. I'll let you keep thinking. You name my list. Jones, George St. Pierre, Demetrius Johnson, and Silva. And then I actually have him with Fedor. I put him at number 5. I think based on what he did, undefeated in the UFC, if he never fights again, he's the greatest fighter of all time. I'm assuming top 5 fighter of all time. Have you decided on anybody else?
No, I'm not dead sure, but he below those top 4, he's kind of floating around the tank with Fedor Emelianenko, Jose Aldo. Just my only, and I feel bad picking at the legacy of a man who has just put a bow on such an incredible career. But the thing that always keeps coming back to me is just how recently it was that he really leveled up to fighting the very best fighters in the world, time in and time out. And that contributes in part to the undefeated thing. We'd be having a completely different conversation about him, fair or not, if he had just some weird random loss in his 3rd fight, back in Dagestan. If he came to the UFC at 15-1 instead of 16-0, the hype would have been different. And the whole conversation would be different. It's probably unfair, but part of the reason that he's 29-0 is that he got to advance in a very kind of gradual and measured way.
Yeah, I totally say you made a great point. If he lost one fight years ago, we probably not put him in the top 5. We started asking that question he'd be that great what if? Where would he be if he kept fighting? I mean, I think that's going to happen anyways, but it'd be to a bigger extent. But that 29-0 is absolutely incredible. Let's do the opposite. Say he decides that he's going to continue fighting, which both of us are actually going to be surprised. But say he does, he's very emotional right now. Maybe, someone close to him says, I think your dad would want you to continue on. Whatever. He decides he wants to continue fighting. Who's next for this guy?
George St. Pierre.
Yeah. I don't
think there's anybody at lightweight that he would care to come back for.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I mean, there's no other fight to sell. I mean, you think about the top guys, the top 3 guys. not looking at rankings, but just the top 3 guys. Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. That was his last 3 opponents. Obviously, you still have that Tony Ferguson fight, which he never got, which is going to kind of suck that if he retires, that we never got the Tony Ferguson fight. But, and I'm not trying to do MMA math with this guy beat that guy, but what we've seen him do to Justin Gaethje, do you really think that Tony Ferguson would have a shot? Like, I don't.
I mean, I don't think he'd do especially better than I expected Gaethje to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I speak for both of us, I think, when I say there's no knock on Tony Ferguson. Like, we're not trying to talk bad about Tony Ferguson or Justin Gaethje. This guy's different. This guy's special. This guy's a once-in-a-lifetime fighter. If the GSP fight actually does happen, which it started looking like it had its best chance. I mean, Khabib. One thing about why he might come back for George St. Pierre fight is that he always said that was his father's dream fight, him versus George St. Pierre. I was at Bellator last week. Well, let me back up. George St. Pierre recently said that if he ever came out of retirement, it would be strictly for the Khabib fight. Last week was at Bellator. I ran into George St. Pierre's longtime head coach, Faraz Sahabi, and I basically asked him, like, what's the chance of this fight happening? And he said 50-50. Like, he says that, like, George really wants it. George doesn't care about belts. He doesn't care about money, but he cares about being challenged. And what bigger challenge would ever be at 39 years old to come back? That fight would be huge. It would do huge pay-per-view numbers. There obviously so many people would be picking George St. Pierre. And, you know, we've seen George St. Pierre's wrestling. I mean, no one could ever challenge. I mean, this guy didn't come from a wrestling background and started out-wrestling All-American wrestlers in Matt Hughes and Sean Shirk, national champion wrestling Josh Koscheck. Frank Trigg was I don't think he was an All-American, but Frank Trigg was, you know, he just throws these guys around. So I always would have a hard time counting out George St. Pierre because of the things I've seen him do. But when I start rationalizing a guy who's fought one time in 7 years, a guy who's 39 years old, against the most dominant fight I've ever seen, then I start saying, like, really? Does George St. Pierre really have a shot against this guy? What camp would you be in? Would you be in the camp that says it's George St. Pierre? How can you ever count out George St. Pierre? Which is basically what Ross Hobby say. Or are you in that camp where I still feel like the more rationalized, like one guy who's fought once in 7 years, and it's Khabib?
If it took place within the next year at 170 pounds, I wouldn't count St. Pierre out, but I would favor Khabib.
Okay. So let me rephrase this question. Is there anybody else? So I just said, like, we all said why it makes sense that if he comes back, George St. Pierre is the guy. Is there anybody else that has a better shot of beating Khabib? That might not make sense to book, but someone has a better shot of beating Khabib than George St. Pierre.
No.
Yeah, I mean, unless we start going outside of the weight class, we do a super fight with the champion, Kamaru Usman, someone like that. But I think it'd be Kobe Covington with his wrestling and his output. But I don't know if anybody I would favor, unless we start going way up to light heavyweight and stupid like that. But anybody close to his weight class, I don't know if there's anybody I would favor over Khabib Nurmagomedov right now.
No.
So that leaves Justin Gaethje. We always like to matchmake the main event. Justin Gaethje has lost. Now Khabib believes he's giving up the title. Obviously, it's one of the best weight classes. Some people believe it is the best weight class in MMA. Does Justin Gaethje get a title shot? And if so, against who? If not, who would you put Justin Gaethje against?
I hope. I don't think they'll necessarily do this, but I hope the UFC will put together like a little 4-man mini tourney, because there are a bunch of people kind of stuck there at the top. Some of them have fought each other and some haven't, and some have fought each other where I'd like to see it again, whereas others I haven't. Like if Conor McGregor decides he wants to jump back into the mix, I would want to see him against Poirier again. I would love to see Poirier against Gaethje again as well. I think that might turn out different, or it was a great fight the first time. I don't necessarily want to see Gaethje versus Ferguson again yet, but if you can give me Gaethje, Ferguson, Poirier, and either Conor McGregor or Michael Chandler in that fourth spot, there aren't too many bad ways you can arrange that, and that gives you a lightweight champion who, I mean, he checks all the boxes. In the absence of Khabib, he's definitely the most qualified guy you can find.
Yeah. So we talk about what's next for Justin Gaethje. You said you wouldn't mind seeing Gaethje fight Poirier again. I wouldn't mind seeing Justin Gaethje fight anybody because, as we say, he's the most exciting fighter in the UFC. He's not going to have a bad fight. Either he smokes a guy, knocks him out, has a great one, or we have a fight of the year candidate. It's that mid-weight classes where we always talk about the best guys from about 135 to 170. You can't make a bad matchup. That's how I feel about this. You mentioned Michael Chandler, and of course, that's the obvious pick. He was the guy that weighed in as a possible fill-in. Do you make Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje for interim? I don't. And the reason why is I think when a guy loses, he recently fought for the head and lose, I don't like always matching him up with a top guy, and I'm going to get to that in the next fight with Jared Cannonier. I like to drop him down a little bit, face maybe someone coming up. So what I would do with Justin Gaethje is I put him against a Charles Oliveira. I think Charles Oliveira did enough to get himself a big fight, a fight night main event or a pay-per-view co-main event, something like that. What I would do, and this is going to be popular with the casuals. It is not going to be popular with the hardcores. The hardcores are going to be like, oh, you're a casual fan. I've been watching UFC since UFC 6, but I'll be a casual fan. I'm a casual fan. I do a podcast, but I do the matchup, and I know I'm going to get hate for this. The next title fight, they already got Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. It looks like it's going to be a done deal. Throw a title on that. I mean, Conor's a star. That's who you want as the champion anyways. Does he deserve the next title shot? No, he doesn't deserve the next title shot. But that's the fight I would do anyways if I ran the UFC.
And you kind of wonder if maybe they had something like that in the back of their head. You don't imagine that the UFC brass is surprised by this retirement, do you?
No. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying that they knew it was going to happen or they expect it to happen. But when you have tragedy that happens in your life recently, I think it's always a possibility, especially with someone like Khabib. I mean, Khabib, he's go back years ago. He was talking about only fighting a handful of times anyways. So just him retiring is not the most, out of left field thing. But, yeah, after what happened with his dad, and he's beating everybody anyways, yeah, I'm not surprised. And I would not be surprised if the UFC kind of had a backup plan. Anything else we should talk about the main event? I know we've talked about a lot of things. Anything else we think we should talk about?
Just 3 cheers for Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in there in an impossible situation. I mean, Khabib was there. He's a feel-good story if he wins, and the UFC knows it because they're playing the make you cry animation, in between cards. He's fighting the most dominant fighter on the planet right now. And this is a guy that when he came over from World Series of Fighting, I never envisioned making his way to a UFC title shot. I didn't picture it. And you wouldn't have found a bigger Gaethje fan than me. I love the guy. I mean, what was it to love? But I was like, this kamikaze style is not going to fly. Sure enough, he beats Michael Johnson, and then he loses to Alvarez and Poirier. And all 3 fights look pretty much the same. He draws all 3 of them into his preferred style of wild brawl in the first round. Only Michael Johnson stays there long enough to get knocked out while, Alvarez and Poirier show a little better composure. But I said, okay, well, that's Justin Gaethje. He's going to be the king of UFC bonuses, and he'll be a broken shell of a man in 3 years. I did not picture him doing this. He really has retooled his game. He has become as sensible a fighter as you can be while still calling yourself the highlight.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first fight of his UFC career that he did not pull a bonus for. Bonuses are out.
Oh, really?
He didn't get one. This is literally the first fight of his UFC career that he didn't get a bonus of some kind.
Yeah, I'm going to jump out. I'm going to let you announce the bonuses in case nobody sees. I'm going to let you announce that in a second, but I just want to jump on something. I always kind of, we don't talk about ahead of time other than we're going to match make for these guys, so just be prepared to have a name. That's it. But I kind of have an idea what I'm going to talk about a little bit before the event happens. And one of the things I was going to say is go back to when Justin Gaethje lost back-to-back fights to Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier. nobody at that point was calling this guy a future, title challenger. Most people thought he was going to fall off his reckless style, and put himself in a situation here where, if we're being honest, who probably deserves to fight for the title next? Well, it's probably be Justin Gaethje versus the winner of Poirier and McGregor, or maybe Michael Chandler, or whoever you want. But like, even getting smoked by Khabib Nurmagomedov tonight, I think the fans would still back him because he's so beloved. And all things you guys, regardless if who you want to argue gets in, he at least puts himself in the situation where, or I say, he's at least in the discussion. Like, no, it's not someone way out of left field that nobody, like Paul Felder, like, he's not getting a title shot next. But like, if they announce on the post-fight show right now, which I'm sure is going on right now while we speak, if they announce Justin Gaethje's fighting for the title against fill in the blank, like, no one's going to argue Justin Gaethje shouldn't be in there. You just mentioned the bonuses. You want to tell everyone who won the bonuses?
Absolutely. Performance of the night goes to Khabib Nurmagomedov. So that's a nice little severance. Well, not severance, he quit, but a nice little going away present for him, as well as Magomed Ankalaev. So that's $100,000 headed towards Dagestan. And then Casey Kenny and Nathaniel Wood, no surprise there, earned fight of the night.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. In the co-main event, we had former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker picking up a unanimous decision over Jared Cannonier. Whittaker just had too many tools. It was a good fight. It wasn't like a barn burner. It did feel definitely weird seeing Robert Whittaker in a 3-round fight. Like, he must have been so relieved, because that's like, the 4th and 5th round is just, he's just used to taking onslaughts and having crazy wars. Which stood out to me, just he had a speed advantage over Jared Cannonier. He did that. His jab was on point. He kind of had that, what we talked about in the breakdown, he had that up jab, which was working. And Cannonier's only response for the most part was his leg kicks. Now, his leg kicks were very effective, especially in the first round, but you have to add more. Like, he had to sting him with his hands. Once it seemed like Robert Whittaker started getting his timing, he started getting out, and then he slide in the pocket, jab. He started I'd say about 3 minutes in the fight. The rest of the 12 minutes was pretty much all Robert Whittaker. There was one point, except for the very last minute, Cannonier did catch Whittaker. I think the broadcast exaggerated how hurt he was. I don't think he was as hurt as they made it sound like. But still, it was a really good performance from Robert Whittaker. What's your thoughts?
I really enjoyed this one. I think I might have liked this fight better than you did, because this for me was neck and neck with Kenny and Wood for the fight of the night.
Really?
I really enjoyed it. The thing about Robert Whittaker is he's never a comfortable fighter to watch. He lives a little too dangerously. His offense is at its best is beautiful. He does live and die by that jab, and part of the way that Israel Adesanya made such short work of him is that Adesanya was able to come back over the top of that jab and just nail him with the right over and over again. But when it's working, man, is it working. He did have a speed advantage, and that's saying a lot, because Cannonier is not a slow guy. Even at 185, even as a former 238-pound man, he's not a slow middleweight. But yeah, Whittaker looked really good. Like, his offense just is really, really slick. I love his punching.
Yeah.
There aren't that many fighters in MMA history that I've enjoyed just watching punch as much as Robert Whittaker. Cannonier definitely dug in with those leg kicks, but I will say this: I'm sure they hurt. Like, I'm not discounting them at all. I'm sure, like, Whittaker's got some ice on that right now, and they certainly marked up his leg, but they didn't change the course of the fight. He never switched stances. He was never afraid to dart in. He never started checking him because he was too busy, like, figuring out how to time and start countering him. So yeah, I mean, he landed a lot of leg kicks, and I'm sure they hurt, and in other circumstances they might have won Cannonier rounds, but they didn't change the whole tenor of the fight, and a lot of times that's what leg kicks do. but just they never did tonight.
Yeah, no, yeah, he was landing them, but Whittaker had an answer. I just want to point out with this, guys, there's a lot of people watching this live. We appreciate you guys. This is the first time we're going live on YouTube. We usually do this as a podcast on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and Sherdog. It will, if you listen to us there, it will also still be there. It just won't be live. But there's people chatting with us. I just want to give a shout out to those guys. This, like I said, this is the first time we're doing it on YouTube. I'm going to try to get in the chat, try to talk to you guys. But to be honest, I'm not. I don't think even Ben has access to this. I don't know if you can see the comments. And I'm still kind of learning what I'm doing, guys. So bear with me if I don't get to. But it seems like a lot of Khabib love. I see somebody talking about they want to. I want to see Chimaev versus Whittaker. I want to see Chimaev versus anybody. One thing I loved, and this is, I think the biggest moment of the fight in the third round is when he landed that high kick. It was that 1-2 dip in right high kick. When we talked about he dips it, he hides it because he kind of and he uses a lot of feints, and it looked like, he's dipping for that left hook, and he dipped right high kick. It was absolutely beautiful. Let's talk about Whittaker for a second. Now, we'll get to matchmaking in a second, but wasn't that long ago, Robert Whittaker was considered the best fighter in the middleweight division. He got smoked by Israel Adesanya. He beat Darren Till. I think a lot of people thought it wasn't the greatest performance. A lot of people thought he was falling off. That was one of the narratives going into this. Like, oh, is he still the same? Do you feel better about Whittaker after this performance? Like, are you starting to think, like, wow, this is the guy that beat Yoel Romero twice. This is the guy who, smoked Jacare. Like, do you feel like that, or are you on the fence? Oh, a two-part question. Were you ever on the fence? Like, did you ever think he fell off? And two, are you back on, like, Whittaker's one of the, he's the guy?
Well, there's two separate questions. Question number one is Whittaker back, as good as ever or better than ever? And the second question is, does he look good enough that I'm ready to see him against Adesanya again? Those are really two separate questions.
Okay, good point.
Question number one is yes. And really, even going into the Till fight, most of my questions about Whittaker were between the ears. And I don't mean that in any, insulting or demeaning way. I knew it would do good for his body. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's had a litany of injuries. He had that freakish hernia that caused, was it the Gastelum fight to be scrapped? Basically, during fight week. That was only going to help. But he's also a guy that was being more and more open about just stress and just he didn't seem happy to be fighting anymore. And he's a guy who all the way up, whether it was at welterweight with his miserable weight cut or through his first just tear at middleweight, the guy just had a smile on his face in the cage half the time. He tried a mean mug and you could just see him just grinning around his mouth guard while he's busting people up. He has seemed happy to be back. He seems to have achieved a sort of work-life balance that, I mean, it doesn't matter for some fighters, but it matters for a guy like Whittaker. And happy Whittaker is very, very good Whittaker. We're still talking about a guy who's 29 years old. He's a year younger than Adesanya of all things. Technically, I don't know if I need to see him fight Adesanya again yet. I'd love to see some other people get a chance, but he's at least as good now as ever.
Yeah, I agree. I think he looked good. I don't think he fell off that much. I think he just had a different strategy against Darren Till. I still think it was effective. And I think it looks sensational tonight. Now, Robert Whittaker, so John Anik tried to get him to call for a title shot. He said, what's next for you? And we expected
Christmas Street.
Yeah, I'm going to put up my Chris Street. I just love Robert Whittaker. Nope, he never calls anybody out. The first person who can get him to trash talk, good for you. I tried to get him to trash talk once in an interview. It was when he was the interim champion. And Gegard Mousasi, they did a... what do they call it? You mention a word and you tell me what comes to your mind, and someone said Robert Whittaker, and he said easiest fight in the division. I asked him about that, and he's like, maybe he's right. That's just Robert Whittaker. So you said you're not ready for him to fight Israel Adesanya, and I agree. It wasn't that long ago he got smoked. But here's my question, and this is why I'll go right to my matchmaking. I feel like that's the only fight you can do is simply there's nobody else. I mean, Israel Adesanya's only been the champion for a little short time, But and this is what I want to bring up is this is why I didn't like Jared Cannonier being in this fight, because Jared Cannonier was the guy that made the claim to be the next in line, and then you matched him up against somebody that Israel Adesanya already beat, somebody that not many people are going to be calling for a title shot. No, it could have worked out if Jared Cannonier catches him with a punch, knocks him out. No, then it works out for you. But, it's a risk that, to me, I don't think was worth it. I thought they should have had Cannonier sit on the sidelines a little bit, and then, maybe he fights Adesanya in December or whenever. Maybe Adesanya's headlining that November card instead of what we got. That's what I don't like. So, unfortunately, I feel like the only matchup left of me, because you have, I guess if Jack Hermanson beats Darren Till, maybe you can make that argument, but then you get the Hermanson and lost to Cannonier, Whittaker beat Cannonier. Like, who else is, like, Uriah Hall beats Anderson Silva?
See, that's the problem, is that, I'm not dying to see Adesanya versus Whittaker 2 yet, but it's tough to find anything for either of those guys right now. Because, it's tough to find anybody that's on a hot enough streak right now to really be the obvious call for the title shot. And it's also kind of tough to find someone for Whittaker that either you don't want bumped out of the title picture if Whittaker beats him, like he just did to Cannonier, or just, doesn't deserve it yet. It's kind of a shame that Omari Akhmadov got knocked off this year, because he was on a streak.
Yeah. No, if Uriah Hall wins next week, if Uriah Hall knocks out Anderson Silva, which is a very good possibility, like, he might jump the line just because they need somebody. They could, you can show the great knockouts that he's had, but there really isn't. I just throw in the chat to the guys watching on YouTube. I asked who should Whittaker face next. Maybe they'll give us some options. But right now, I'm going. I decided if I put your feet to the fire, who would you put Whittaker against next?
Whittaker against Costa. Just get them get them busy with each other, because otherwise they have a good chance of beating anyone else in the top 10, and that makes it even harder to match Adesanya. Meanwhile, if one of them really dusts the other, then there's a little more interest in bringing him back in for a title shot.
Yeah, especially if Whittaker wins again. Now you got 2 wins in a row. We actually would be 3 wins in a row after losing to the champion. I'll let you kick it off. Jared Cannonier, as we've seen with Whittaker, the division is so shallow, and when the champion has kind of already beaten so many people in the division, you're not too far away from, like, returning. Like, Cannonier gets 1 or 2 fights to get back in there. So who would you put Cannonier against?
If Hall gets past Silva, I like that one. Although, if Hall gets past Silva, I like that one. Does Derek Brunson have a fight lined up?
So that's who I was putting him in. The reason why I don't like the Hall fight is simply kind of the same situation. Now you're gonna have the guys that might get a title shot, and then you knock one out, and then what happens when Adesanya beats or fights the other guy? Like, I kind of feel like you're having the same situation. But I don't know. That's what I would do. Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. That's the name I wrote down.
Yeah, that works for me.
All right, let's move on. Before that, in the third fight from the top, we had Alex Volkanovski versus Walt Harris. Alex Volkanovski. Sorry, guys. I'm too excited. Alexander Volkov beat Walt Harris. He won by second round TKO. What a performance! This is one of my favorite performances of the night. Everything Volkov had to do, he did incredible. He used his length well. He pressured him, which I didn't really expect. Like, he didn't let Harris kind of set himself. At times, Harris got hurt. Many times he started trying to turn and walk away until a lot of guys would do it, try to walk away and reset. And Volkov hurried to the spot. Was trying to no, I'm not even gonna let you give you a breather. His straight right was on point. He led with it a lot, which is not something he does, which is a nice wrinkle in his game. A lot of feints. His feints were kind of drawing out the attacks and then responding. And then that kick to the body. I mean, that when you see a heavyweight curl over, I couldn't imagine the amount of force that came in from that kick. Just such a good performance from Volkov. What do you take away from this fight?
It looked like semi-shield to me.
Okay.
When you just have a guy that tall that he can just kind of just basically reach out with a snap kick and just put the ball of his foot it was halfway from his liver to his xiphoid, the little point at the bottom of your sternum. that you're supposed to avoid when you're giving someone CPR. Yeah, like just great performance by Volkov. Seriously, he is. This is going to sound like low praise, but it is high praise if you've watched MMA for a long time. He is one of the greatest heavyweights ever at fighting like a man of his height.
Yeah.
I mean, well, just after we just saw, Stefan Struve get crushed again, like an hour and a half before. He's a guy that, he has good footwork, good jab. You mentioned, he led with his straight right. The length of his arms allows him to do things that, other heavyweights might not get away with, like the way he killed Verdun with like a rear hand uppercut, which is, generally considered to be not technically advisable, but he nailed him with it. Volkov did great, and this is how he usually does. He's just he's good at avoiding damage, and I predicted this fight to look kind of like the Derek Lewis fight, just minus the part where Derek Lewis lammed him at the end. It was even more lopsided than that. I mean, he folded Harris. Fantastic performance, and I was feeling sketchy about this pick after the weigh-ins when Harris came in like the shape of his life and Volkov came in not in the shape of his life. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna feel so dumb about 90 seconds into this fight. But no, like, hat off to Volkov. I don't see a clear path for him to the title picture. There's just, there's a lot of wrestlers in the way. We saw what happened when he ran into Curtis Blades. But man, wouldn't it be hilarious if this guy was the first ever Bellator/M1/UFC heavyweight champion?
Yeah, I think some things need a break right for him, but I actually can see it happening, especially with Stipe Miocic as the champion. Like, I was thinking that when I was watching, I'm like, I think he should do very well against Stipe. Now, I think it'd be, we've talked about this past, like, the road to the title might be more difficult than actually beating the champion. Like, because you have a Curtis Blades, maybe Alistair Overeem can take him down, use that. I think we may be over-exaggerating how weak his takedown defense is. I think it's much better. We've seen it be pretty good in the past. Just Curtis Blades, I just think, is another level wrestler that doesn't exist in the division. But that said, Volkov looks fantastic tonight. I can't keep saying it. Everything where he had an advantage, it just worked. One thing we talked about in the previous show is that he has a game plan. He'll stick to it, and it seems like his game plan is always on point. And you mentioned Stefan Struve. This is exactly how Stefan Struve should fight. It makes you appreciate Tim Sylvia. Like, when you see these tall guys struggle, it makes me appreciate like Tim Sylvia better. Anyways, let's do some matchmaking. This will be the last time we'll do matchmaking. We'll do it with Alex Volkanovski. I said it again. Alexander Volkov. Before we get that, I just want to throw out some matchups people put in the chat. Marion Kravins. I hope I said your name right. I apologize if I didn't. He's saying Jared. So Jared, as in Jared and Cannonier, he put him against Kelvin. He also mentioned Brunson, which we said Kelvin Gastelum, which is a guy we weren't even really thinking about middleweight. Henry Down said he made a good point. He said, Bobby Knuckles versus Izzy. Will Izzy want to fight that matchup? I think that's a good point. But I don't know who else there is. That's what kind of happens. So let's go to Volkov. He said, they mentioned some names. He said Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem. I would go Alistair Overeem. I like that matchup. He asked for it. I think that makes sense. What would you do?
I love that one. They tried to make an Overeem fight a while back, and I can't remember why it fell through, but I still love that one. I would like Rozenstruik as well. It would certainly give us a good idea of where Rozenstruik's game is right now. I don't like JDS. Just that feels like a war crime right now. JDS has lost, 3 straight by knockout or TKO. Volkov isn't a huge hitter, but he's a big enough hitter to do some serious harm to this version of JDS.
Yeah, I agree. Before that, we had a first-round knockout of Phil Hawes over Jacob Malkoun. I don't want to take – we kind of bashed Malkoun a little bit, but we did say, we only saw a little bit of film. What we saw in film didn't impress us. So I kind of feel like we told people like, don't get too excited. This guy doesn't like UFC. It doesn't look like a UFC fighter. But we kind of had a little like warning, like, hey, there's only a little bit of film. Maybe he's not what we've seen. No, we were right. He wasn't ready. I mean, he got absolutely smashed. What do you think this tells you about Phil Hawes, a guy that had a lot of hype for a long time, kind of didn't live up to that hype, but now he's on a little bit of run. First fight in the UFC was absolutely just smash Jacob Malkoun in the first round. You get any more excited about Phil Hawes?
I'm a little more excited about Phil Hawes. Sure, we're talking about a guy who went through Dana White's Contender Series twice and tried out for the Ultimate Fighter once. I mean, this guy's been knocking on the front door, back door, side door of the UFC. He's in. The first thing that they said to him in the post-fight interview was, Phil Hawes, you belong in the UFC. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I say. Phil Hawes, you belong in the
Absolutely.
UFC. I don't know if you're a future contender, but I highly doubt that you're going to lose to and wash out immediately. I think, well, if you put a Jacob Malkoun in front of him, a guy that really needs to take him down in order to win, and is that much slower of hand and foot, he's gonna just put him in the ground like he did Malkoun. So I'm very interested to see what they do with him next.
Yeah, he lost to Julian Marquez on the Contender Series, got knocked out. Since then, he's won 5 fights in a row, all 5 by stoppage. So maybe, I mean, he's 31. Maybe he's just kind of late bloomer. He's finally coming into his potential. Like you said, he didn't beat, world beater, but I am a little more excited seeing Phil Hawes moving forward. Before that, another UFC newcomer, and I'm completely going to butcher her name, help me out. I know you're really good at this.
Lilia Shakirova.
Shakirova had her debut. She got put in against highly ranked Lauren Murphy. Murphy won by second round submission, getting her first submission victory in her career. She won by rear naked choke. This was a short notice fight for her opponent. That said, I thought Lauren Murphy looked really good. I think she pressed the action. The big thing that stood out to me, which I thought was the experience, is she was just touching instead of trying to land the perfect shot while her opponent was loading up on everything. And that really, really mattered. The other thing, and I just kind of want to do this fight quick because we're well into this broadcast and we have a lot of fights left. Lauren Murphy, what really impressed me is, Shakirova comes from a wrestling background, was Lauren Murphy getting double unders and tripping her to the ground, getting a takedown, and then eventually getting the rear naked. That was really impressive. Just a really good showing from Lauren Murphy, who now is on a 4-fight winning streak in the UFC. What do you think of Lauren Murphy's performance?
Best performance of her UFC run so far. There's been a little bit of smoke and mirrors there. I was there for her win over Andrea Lee in Houston. I thought Andrea Lee won that fight, but however she got there, Lauren Murphy was on a win streak. This was a must-win, and it was must-win in dominant fashion because her original opponent had fallen off. This was someone making her UFC debut. She did exactly what you're supposed to do to that kind of fighter. So she stepped up with one of the most impressive performances of her career at absolutely the right time. She made a passionate case for a title shot next, and honestly, it makes all the sense in the world. All I'd add, just real quick, is that I'm proud of myself because I called this fight dead right based on relatively little available tape on Lilia Shakirova. I watched her fights. I've been face-to-face with Lauren Murphy, and she is a specimen. She is one of the most powerfully built flyweights in any promotion. And I just watched Shakirova and I said, the things she's doing, the way she's tossing around these women, she's not going to be able to do to Lauren Murphy. And sure enough, Murphy was able to shuck her off when she wanted to, and then when Murphy wanted the takedown, she got it with ease, and choked her out. Great finish.
Yeah, while you were talking about that, and you did call that. You said that she'd be too strong, and she definitely was. The thing, while you were talking about that, I went to MMA Decisions because I recently watched the Andrea Lee fight for tape study, but I wasn't watching it to I was just focusing on Lauren Murphy, things she does. I wasn't rescoring it. I just wanted to check out the Andrea Lee fight, and I made decisions. There was 12 scorecards, including my own, and all 12 gave it to Andrea Lee. I gave it 30-27 lead. Now, by no means was it a robbery. It was a close fight. I remember that even in the tape study. And just because something's 30-27 does not mean it's a absolutely whitewashing one side or the other. We'll get to that later on. But yeah, I scored it for Lauren Murphy. You mentioned that she was talking about a title shot. To me, there's nobody else. Like she was originally matched up against Cynthia Calvillo. I don't think she should have to fight Cynthia Calvillo. I think she's done enough. She's won 4 fights in the division, and as crazy as it sounds, I think we got to see Lauren Murphy fight for a title.
And you know what? Right after we just finished talking about the middleweight title picture, why would you make her fight Calvillo? Because Calvillo is probably going to get a title shot pretty soon too.
Yes.
So why would you take any of the shine off that by having either her or Murphy beat the other?
Yeah, absolutely great point. I 100% agree with that. And the first fight of the main card, we had a rematch of a controversial stoppage. No controversy this time. Magomed Ankalaev versus Ian Cutelaba. Ankalaev knocked out Cutelaba cold in the first round. We were both really high on Ankalaev, saying that we think he could fight for a title one day. The fight started off a little bit slow. I think that was just when both guys really respecting each other's power. But when they started exchanging, the difference to me is one, there was a little bit of speed advantage for Ankalaev, but more where he was throwing his punches, he was keeping his punches tighter instead, not looping. Even in his knockout, it kind of looped a little bit, but it was at a it wasn't all the way out at like 45. It was more like on like a 30, and that was the difference, and that's what knocked him out. He's got serious power. He's got 5 wins in a row. I want to see him fight a ranked fighter next, and this is what we expected, and it looked fantastic.
Not much more to say than that. Light heavyweight is a division where it's a quick ladder into the top 10 and a quick ladder from there to a title shot. There's a lot of older guys there, a lot of guys that have already fought each other. So yeah, like big things coming up soon for Ankalaev. And for the record, I think this was Cutelaba fighting his best fight. Like I was actually impressed with how he did. He was able to land solidly on Ankalaev a few times, back him up some. Just Ankalaev is a much more sophisticated striker. He has more weapons. He has better footwork. You mentioned his punches in particular are much tighter. Mm-hmm. So once those initial jitters wore off, Ankalaev was quicker to the punch just about every time. I think because of the straightness of his punches and his superior footwork, putting him in the right place. Yeah.
Shout out to James Peters, who's absolutely right in our comments. He's a big supporter of Donald Trump. He's voting for Donald Trump. I don't know how that's more power to you. I don't know how that's relevant to this, and I don't know how putting Trump 2020 over and over again. I don't know in the comments. I don't know how that's going to get someone to vote for him. It might do the opposite, but anyways, if it works for you, more power to you. But moving on.
To 2 guys who definitely will not be voting for Donald Trump because they are not American.
Yeah. Yeah. In the headline and prelim fight, Stefan Struve versus Tai Tuivasa. This is a fight that we had a lot of jokes on in the preview. We both picked it correctly, so shout out to that. You picked Tai Tuivasa to win. I picked Stefan Struve to win, but then I said I completely got it wrong and Tuivasa should win. So I'm still getting credit for that one. We both picked that one right. So Tuivasa slimmed up. Like, I like that. The other thing I liked about him, suddenly the clinch became an advantage for Tuivasa. That's something where he would want to avoid like crazy. He spent some time with American Kickboxing Academy. Obviously, there's a lot of good wrestlers there. He looks like he's only 27, so I like that. And he looks like someone who's trying to improve. And the reason why I took Struve is I saw little bits in the Rothwell fight that makes me think, like, wow, he's going to start using his length. And then in this fight, it was the complete opposite. It went back to the Struve we know and love, who backs up to the cage, keeps his chin high, and gets ready to get knocked out. He's 32 years old. He just looks like a guy who's just there to get a paycheck. He doesn't seem like his heart is into it.
I can't believe he has 24 fights in the UFC.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had 12 fights since he was diagnosed with a hole in his heart.
Yeah.
He's had probably 10 since Mark Hunt broke his jaw. Like, complete separation to where, like, there was a gap in his teeth because his jaw came apart. I can't believe he's still climbing into the cage. it's one fight now since his nuts got turned into pate. Like, what's it going to take? Like, poor Stefan Struve.
Yeah, nothing else to take this, but yeah, good performance by Tai Tuivasa. Before that, the fight that I know I said that I was most excited about before, other than the main event, this is the fight I was most excited about. I know you were very excited about. Two guys were very high on Casey Kenny versus Nathaniel Wood. Casey Kenny won a unanimous decision. I say unanimous decision because obviously all three judges gave him the victory. But that I don't think really tells. If you just looked, you went to Sherdog, the Fight Finder, and saw a unanimous decision, one scorecard 30-27, I think you would. And I don't even hate that scorecard. I know a lot of people like on Twitter were saying, "Oh, how could you score at 30-27? The fight was so close." All three rounds were toss-ups, and because of that, I think it's okay with having a 30-27. But what I want to say is, if you just went to the Fight Finder or wherever you see, and you saw, you saw this, you'd think, hey, Casey Kenny destroyed Nathaniel Wood. This fight was incredible. It was one fight of the night. This is what we expected. I don't feel like either guy's stock went down. I think they both had great performances. What did you take from it?
Very much the same. I'm one of the people who was complaining about the 30-27 just because all three rounds were very competitive, but I thought the first round was a pretty clear-cut Kenny round, and I thought the second round was a pretty clear-cut Wood round. The third round I thought was razor close. I gave it to Kenny, but I mean, yeah, so I don't love a 30-27 because I'd have to rewatch it, but I'm having a hard time picturing giving that second round to Kenny. I was surprised once they were in there and starting to put hands on each other. I expected Wood to be slightly larger.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pretty big bantamweight, and this wasn't even at bantamweight. Kenny's a former flyweight champ in LFA as well as Tattoo Palace fights. But, I mean, Wood looked bigger.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, Kenny's the one that really got tired first.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not a great look, but he continued to throw effective offense, even into the third round where he was the guy that was breathing harder and clearly looked more tired between rounds. So, yeah, both guys came off looking really good. I'm excited for both of their next fight. And I think of them as two guys that are kind of knocking on the edge of the top 15 in the bantamweight division.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm the biggest Casey Kenny supporter. I think when you score this fight, it comes down to the volume of Nathaniel Wood versus the power of Casey Kenny, and the cost those couple takedowns. And whatever you value more, I'm okay with any scorecard. Like, it was really close. Even when they said 29-28, 29-28, 30-27, I still didn't know who won that fight. I kind of thought that it was Kenny getting it, but Casey Kenny got 2 wins in just over in a month span. Absolutely fantastic. I'm just gonna go out to the chat. There's one guy asked about how we feel about John Jones getting this GOAT status, comparing to Khabib. We're not going to go back into that. We did speak of that, so when this ends, go back. I do believe John Jones is the greatest fighter of all time, but we both talked extremely high on Khabib. One guy was asking where Jordan Breen was, where TJ DeSantis. My name is Keith Schillen. This is Ben Duffy. We've both been working for Sherdog a long time. Listen, nobody loves TJ DeSantis and Jordan Breen more than we do. I used to be a caller on the show. Keith from Providence and Keith from Coventry. If anybody who's listening way back in the day, Ben used to do a show with TJ DeSantis. TJ has other commitments that he does, and he's absolutely fantastic what he does. So,
and for the record, I believe Jordan Breen is still at Bloody Elbow.
Yeah, there you go. But
you can find his writing there on a weekly basis.
But we're both friends with those guys. Those guys are absolutely fantastic what they do. So no hate from us. So don't think we're hating on those guys. Before that, speaking about a guy that gets some love, Shavkat Rakhimov. I know I butchered that name. I apologize. Took out Alex Cowboy Oliveira first round sub. Just not a great weekend for Cowboy Oliveira. He missed weight. Then he was getting picked apart. I thought he was getting picked apart on the feet. He finally, crashes into the pocket to try to get a takedown, and Rakhimov catches him in a guillotine. What a performance! I don't know what to say. Alex Oliveira is already an extremely tough test for anybody. Add in the fact that he is your opponent in UFC debut, add in the fact that he missed weight. Like, what a performance, Rachmanov. I apologize. I suck at these. Give me some time.
We knew exactly who you were talking about. I mean, I was very impressed by Rachmanov. I picked Oliveira to win this. I expected, just based on the tape on Rachmanov, for him to be surprised at how physically strong and athletic and quick Oliveira was. I expected it to just be kind of a level up moment for him. I mean, I thought he was UFC material either way, but I was like, he's going to drop this one, going to need to take a little bit of a step back, and maybe get his feet wet. That was not the case. And I don't know if something was wrong with Oliveira. He blew weight. He didn't look quite like his usual self, but maybe he just didn't look like his usual self because Rachmanov was that much sharper. But there was no problem in the strength department. And I thought he did carve him up on the feet, and then on the ground, what a great guillotine. Just locked him down, put on the squeeze, Oliveira tapped before his head popped off.
Yeah, really good performance. I look forward to seeing him fight again. Oh, all right.
You're still muted. There.
Sorry about that.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that, guys. First time on YouTube, I'm trying to mute different things that normally we record, and we would edit that, but that's what you get with live broadcasts. Yeah, good showing by him. Let's go on. Probably the biggest surprise of the evening was Sam Alvey and Don Un Jung going to a split draw. And we always talk about like who's stock. I always think about like who gets a win from a draw versus a loss. I feel like it's almost like a win for Sam Alvey. And what I mean by that is he came in as a big underdog. I picked him to get knocked out. I believe you picked him to get knocked out. And he might have won 2 out of 3 rounds. If you had to pick a winner, it'd probably be Sam Alvey. Like, I thought he won the first and second round. I did score for Sam Alvey. I thought he looked really good, which is I was not expecting to say heading into this broadcast. A lot of things that especially on the previous show, a lot of things that I was kind of bagging on Sam Alvey is his output. He did a lot of movement that I knew he'd do. He did a lot of putting his back towards the cage, but he actually picked up the timing of Jung. Like every single time Jung went to set himself, Alvey was beating him to the punch, and stopping his winning the movement battle, landing the biggest shots. It wasn't until the third round where Jung caught him a couple times with the elbows and almost put him out. And I think his fight IQ lost him the fight because I thought he suddenly clinched. I thought he should have stepped back and just let go of his hands. Some reason I thought maybe in his mind he thought if he took down Alvey he could submit him. But I actually think that was a wrong avenue. I think he had Alvey hurt. He might have been able to put him away.
Yeah, I wonder if he didn't realize how badly Alvey was rocked. I don't know what it was, but yeah, biggest surprise of the card for me. Basically, any time that you subject me to a Sam Alvey fight before noon, and it's this good, like that bodes well for the rest of the card. So like I knew it was gonna pop from then on. But not only was it a fun fight to watch, but same as you, I thought Alvey won. I gave Alvey the first 2 rounds, and he was doing well in the third until, as you say, he got caught, and that's going to happen. Alvey's getting older. He's getting a lot more miles on him. The chin will not always be what it was. Jung is a powerful guy. Jung's one of those guys that sometimes it looks like he's like over swinging and loading up on things, but even like the short little things like seem to hurt people. I think Jung countered like a low kick with an uppercut, and that's what put Alvey on skates. But yeah, I don't know if Jung could have put him away if he just stayed at distance and kept punching, but what he did won him the round but not the fight, and I would consider this a win for Alvey. I think Alvey was probably fighting for his job.
Yeah, that's a good point. I totally agree. Like if he lost this fight, he might have been on our cut list. Before that, Luana Jojua went against Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick's UFC debut. She won by technically by first round stoppage. As the first round ended, there was a huge cut on Jojua's nose. She was unable to come out for the second round. It was stopped. Maverick's stand-up looked sensational. Her left hand just was accurate all night. I love that she started, stepping in with elbows. That's actually what cut Jojua. This girl's 23 years old. She came in. She's always been the girl who's like physically imposing. You can see it, but she was even more cut up for this fight. She her arms looked even more definition, and she beat some good people to get into the UFC. I mean, her last fight before this was Pearl Gonzalez, former UFC veteran, Deanna Bennett. She beat. I mean, she's beaten good girls, and she's 23. Like, I'm excited to see where she goes, and like, I think instantly she's got to be one of the best girls in the division. And a lot of times we talk about her strength. Her strength is really her wrestling, and we didn't see that in this fight because Jojua's a submission threat, so she kept on her feet and just picked her apart. I thought she looked great.
I do as well. I was seriously impressed. Her striking has come along so far in the last 2 years, which, I mean, you would expect that of someone this young who is just, stepping up in competition. She lost a couple in Invicta, but she's been improving from fight to fight. But this was like a big difference from the Phoenix series stuff, like of her last couple of fights. Really sharp, which is great because, I mean, she's going to be at a height and reach disadvantage to just about everybody at flyweight. Obviously, most of them will be better strikers than Liana Jojua, but if she is able to connect like this and just get inside like this on taller women, that bodes good things for her UFC run.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing her in the future. And the first fight of the night we had Joel Alvarez versus Alexander Yakovlev. Joel Alvarez won by first round submission by armbar. Just Yakovlev had a terrible strategy. I mean, he's a wrestler, so I think it's natural for him to go for a takedown. But that's Joel Alvarez's world. He went for a takedown. As soon as he went for the takedown, Joel Alvarez jumped on a guillotine. It looked tight for a while. I mean, it was an arm and guillotine, but we've seen guys get submitted with arm and guillotine. He got out of that, but as soon as he got out of that, shortly after, Joel Alvarez transitioned, switched his hips, got on the armbar, and then forced Yakovlev to tap. Yakovlev, not a really good performance. But Alvarez, he has 18 wins, all 18 by stoppage. I think this is his 16 submission win of his career. He's only 27. He's looking better and better each fight. I'm not confident that we'll see him as a contender one day. But what I will say is, from this point going forward, or at least for the near future, I'll always say there's an avenue for him to win pretty much any fight. And that is a lot. That is saying a lot about a fighter. That you say that more about him than you can about a lot of competition. So he's definitely a guy that suddenly, guy that I wasn't that high on, that's slowly starting to creep up my rankings, and I'm like, man, I feel much better about this guy. Like, what's your thoughts on Alvarez's performance?
I tapped the brakes on Alvarez slightly. There are two basic issues. Issue number one is that he blew weight pretty badly, which is fine. I mean, he's a 6 foot tall guy with a wingspan, but it'll be a whole different game, him trying to do these things to welterweights. The bigger concern is that while he's on a 3-fight win streak, I think it's literally over 3 guys that are either out of the UFC or will be out of the UFC. I don't think he's really beaten a UFC quality lightweight yet. I will want to see that, but as you said, he now has an avenue of victory. When a guy comes up from AFL, which no shade on AFL, but about the best thing you can say about it is that it's Spain's premier MMA promotion. There's always the question of whether, is he going to really be able to do this to UFC level fighters? Kind of like when Cody McKenzie came in having guillotined 11 straight guys in Alaska, and we found out that didn't always work at the UFC level. He is now doing it at least to like low level UFC guys. So Now I want to see him against a mid-level UFC guy, maybe at welterweight.
Yeah, I agree. One thing you talked about that he beat low-level competition or people that probably shouldn't be in the UFC anymore. But that's what you should do if you're a UFC fighter and you're a good prospect. You should take these guys out and finish by a first-round submission. Yeah, good showing by him. That is all the bouts of the evening. We covered them all. So let's get to the fun stuff. Let's start with the cut list. The cut list is, if you've never listened to this show before, both me and Ben have to agree that this person should no longer be in the UFC. While it is definitely a negative stand, especially against the fighter, what we got to remember is when we say this person gets cut, that also leaves an opening for future people to come in, people that you're excited about, people in the regional scene. So I got two. Do you have any?
I have two.
Okay, I'll let you go and see if I have a feeling it's going to be the same two.
I would let Alexander Yakovlev go.
Okay, that's the one that's on mine.
In the UFC.
Yep, that's one of mine.
And the other is Stefan Struve.
We are 100% in agreement. It's sad to see Stefan Struve leave, but his heart, as we talked about, you mentioned Joel Alvarez beating Joseph Delphi. We both said that it seemed like his heart wasn't into it. I feel the same way with Stefan Struve. I feel like his heart is not into it. He's just getting a paycheck. So we both. I mean, he's 1-5 over his last 6 fights. Time to cut him. Let's get to the fun stuff. The Bulls and the Bears. The Bulls and the Bears are a stock market reference where if the market's going good, it's a bull market. If it's going bad, it's a bear market. So we do this. We pick up to 3. It can be fighters, anything where whose stock rose the most. Ben, I'll let you go first. Would you prefer doing the Bulls or the Bears?
You know what? Let's do the Bulls first. Let's get some happy going.
All right, I'll let you go first.
Okay. From the least bullish to the most bullish, although all 3 are pretty good. Shavkat Rakhmonov came in debuting. I believe he's Kazakhstan's first male fighter in the UFC. Took on a guy who, whatever else you may say about him, is not usually an easy out and made him into an easy out.
That's true.
Like, just putting away Alex Oliveira in the first round after outclassing him everywhere is a hell of a way to make a splash. If nothing else, Khamzat Chimaev teaches us that making a big splash in your UFC debut in the era of COVID leads to good things in the future, because the UFC really, really needs to go with the hot hand. They need to fill these cards. And so, if you've got any shine at all, it's good stuff. So stock up for him in a big way. Stock up for Alexander Volkov. Volkov looked fantastic. I mean, he was a favorite going in, but he, at least in my opinion, looked better in victory than I expected him to. I expected the usual kind of Alexander Volkov button-down game plan, just where he's going to, outbox and outkick a guy, and the only question will be whether the other guy can take him down or maybe just land something huge and crazy. It was not that. When he had the opportunity, he zapped Walt Harris, and this is a Walt Harris who looked as physically fit and seemed as motivated and focused as ever. It's entirely possible that Alexander Volkov just dusted the best Walt Harris we've seen yet. So very impressive. And my number 1, Robert Whittaker. Until about 2 days out, he was an underdog. We're talking about a guy that was champion barely a year ago, came back, won a fight, and still, an underdog to a guy who's 3-0 in the division. He was even money by fight time, and he looked fantastic. He took everything Cannonier had to offer. His offense looked crisp, and he's going to go put up his Christmas tree. So 3 cheers for Robert Whittaker.
That's a really good list. I'll give you my top. My number 3 was also Alexander Volkov, so I'm not going to hype on it too much. It was just a pillow-to-post performance. That's why he made my list. My number 2, Casey Kenny. The reason why I put him on the list, he went to Abu Dhabi twice in the last month, picked up 2 wins. I think he got 2 performance bonuses during both of these. And the biggest thing is his last fight, he beat up Alatang Haley. He took a step up in competition against a guy like Nathaniel Wood. One thing people would say, like, how good would his stand-up look against someone who's known for the stand-up in a guy like Nathaniel Wood, and it still looked great. Really good performance. And my number one, I'm going to have two people as number one, but it's the same theme. And this simply goes because of Khabib announcing his retirement. It opens the door for two guys that were kind of stuck in line. First is Islam Makhachev, because he's one of the best lightweights in the world, but his teammate, his mentor, a guy that he considers a brother, was the champion. He was not going to get a title shot. I mean, he still has some wins he's going to do, but now the possibility of a title shot is there. But, of course, I can't mention Khabib Nurmagomedov without mentioning, of course, Conor McGregor, who is my biggest winner of the night, because Conor McGregor is back in the title picture. I mean, if you talk about Khabib, he said, he's going to win 10 fights, or he wouldn't even entertain questions about Conor McGregor. With Khabib leaving, Conor McGregor is the most. I mean, he has always been the most marketable lightweight, but he's, his next fight could be for a title. So I think Conor McGregor's stock went up. Let's go to the Bears. These are people who had bad nights. I'll go first this time, and Alexander Yakovlev is my number 3. He's 3-6 in the UFC, and he's on his way out. So he was my number 3 Bear. My number 2 is next for the middleweight title is my number 2, as in it's going to be hard to sell Israel Adesanya versus whoever you put in there next, because he's already smashed everybody. And if Robert Whittaker is the guy you're going to be putting in there, it's going to be a hard sell. But my number 1 Bear is UFC titles. And what I mean by that is, in the last year, we've had many champions willing to forfeit the title. Henry Cejudo gave up 2 titles this year. John Jones gave up a title, and now Khabib Nurmagomedov has given up a title. It's the UFC's having a hard time keeping their champions. Besides them losing, but keeping champions who want to keep competing. So those are my 3 Bears. Who are your Bears?
I have just 2. One is going to be Stefan Struve. If he had anything left, Tai Tuivasa is someone he should have been able to beat. He had real obvious avenues to victory, and instead it just looked like all the other recent Stefan Struve losses. So if you can lose stock when you're already like 1-4 in your last 5, he did so. And my other is Ion Cutelaba. We will look back probably, say, 2-3 years from now and say, okay, this was the last time Cutelaba ever fought an even like top 15 quality guy. He's a dangerous fighter. He's a hell of an athlete. He hits like a ton of bricks, but he is just a little too inconsistent between the ears. I think we saw him fight about as smart as he can fight, and it wasn't nearly enough. We may look back at these 2 fights with Ankalaev as kind of like his high watermark in the UFC.
All right, I love your list. Last one, we got to get to the grade. What was your overall grade for the card?
I'm going to give this one an A.
Wow.
I mean, we had a fight, in our main event that was, it was electrifying. It wasn't an all-time great fight, but it was sure exciting, and it was a happening. One of the greatest fighters of our generation just retired, and you and I both believe it. We had a bunch of sensational finishes. We had an 18-second fight, and the whole thing was over by dinner time.
Yeah, so I definitely go to grade it higher simply for the fact being on the East Coast, and it's 7:45 right now, and not only have we got to watch an event, but I'm also wrapping up a hour and a half recap show. So I definitely put it very high. You've been giving me a hard time about grading so highly, but I was giving it an A-. So you actually did grade higher than me for once. I think it's been on a streak where I've been graded high. But everything you said, and while losing Khabib Nurmagomedov if he retires is never a good thing for the UFC, he's a big star. The stars were out. I always judge a UFC by like the tweets of the casual UFC celebrity fans. Like LL Cool J was tweeting today, and I don't know who else, but like The Rock and all these people. Yeah. So that is there's going to be so Khabib brings those eyeballs, and there's going to be talking points like Stephen A. Smith would be talking about it. Who should fight for the title? He's going to say Conor, and when the talking heads at ESPN is going to be talking about the sport. It's always a good thing. So I overall, you mentioned we had a round of the year contender with Kenny and Wood. There wasn't a dull moment, and that's usually how I go. Like there wasn't a moment where I was really bored. Like what was the most boring moment? Was it Sam Alvey, Daniel Jung, which wasn't that bad? So
exactly.
Overall, that's our grade. Ben, this is the first time we're on YouTube. It was fairly successful. I'm still working things out. I'm muting things and that, but I think people, for the most part, enjoyed it. We'll try to do more live streams to YouTube. If you want to hear a podcast form, you want to put it, in your ears and where you're at the gym or you're driving or something like that, head over to any podcasting format player you use and check out Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, which will be on there. And shortly after this show ends, of course, you can go to Sherdog.com. We'll be up there on the front page shortly after. And then we get some other avenues we're working on. So, Ben, last question for you. Sum up UFC 254 in one sentence.
Goodbye, and thanks for all the memories.
There you guys have it, guys. We'll be back next week recapping UFC. I don't know which number it is, but it's Anderson Silva versus Uriah Hall. See you then.
181.